The morning air in the Amazon rainforest felt thick and heavy around Lieutenant Jake Morrison as he checked his equipment one more time. Sweat dripped from his forehead despite the early hour. He had been on many missions during his military career, but this scientific expedition was different. No enemies to fight, no battles to win. Just trees, insects, and the strange plants that Dr. Lisa Carter seemed so excited about. "Jake, come look at this," Lisa called from her position near a fallen log about 20 feet away. She was crouched down, her blonde hair tied back in a messy ponytail, completely focused on something growing in the shadows. Her hands moved carefully as she collected samples in small containers. Jake walked over, his boots making soft sounds on the wet ground. Lisa had been studying these weird plants for 3 days now. She called them extremophiles, organisms that could live in places where most things would die. The Amazon was full of them, she had explained. Plants and tiny creatures that somehow thrived in conditions that would kill normal life. "What did you find now?" Jake asked, kneeling beside her. He had learned to be interested in her work, even though most of it went over his head. Lisa was smart, probably the smartest person he had ever met. She could explain complicated science things in ways that almost made sense to him. "This moss is incredible," Lisa said, pointing to a patch of green and blue growth on the rotting wood. "It produces oxygen at night instead of during the day. Most plants do the opposite. This could be huge for understanding how life adapts to different environments." Jake nodded, though he was not entirely sure why night oxygen was so important. His job was to keep Lisa safe while she did her research. The Amazon had plenty of dangers, from poisonous snakes to dangerous rapids. But Lisa seemed to forget about danger when she found something interesting. "How much longer do we need to stay here?" Jake asked, swatting at a mosquito that was buzzing around his ear. "The radio check with base camp is in 2 hours. Just a few more samples," Lisa said, carefully placing another container in her backpack. "This area has species I have never seen before. The biodiversity here is amazing." Jake stood up and looked. Around the forest, everything seemed normal. Birds were singing in the trees above them. Insects buzzed and clicked their usual jungle symphony. The air smelled of wet earth and growing things. Nothing seemed wrong, but something felt different. Maybe it was just his military training making him paranoid. "Lisa, we should head back soon," he said. "Something feels off." Lisa looked up at him with a smile. "You worry too much. What could happen out here? This is just a research trip." That was when the sky began to change. At first, Jake thought it was just clouds moving in. The green canopy above them started to grow darker, as if the sun was being blocked. But then he noticed the light was not natural. It was too bright, too white, and it seemed to be coming from directly above them. "Lisa, get up. Now," Jake said, his voice sharp with command. His military instincts were screaming that something was very wrong. Lisa looked up and gasped. The white light was getting brighter, cutting through the thick forest canopy like a laser. It was not the sun. It was not lightning. It was something else entirely. "What is that?" Lisa whispered, standing up slowly. Her scientific curiosity was fighting with a growing sense of fear. Jake grabbed her arm and started pulling her toward the trees. "Move, we need to find cover," but it was too late. The light became blinding, so bright that Jake had to close his eyes. He felt heat on his skin, not burning but warm like standing near a fire. The forest around them went completely silent. No birds, no insects, no wind. Just the humming sound of whatever was above them. Jake tried to run, still holding Lisa's arm, but his legs felt heavy. Each step became harder than the last. The air itself seemed to be getting thicker, like trying to move through water. He could hear Lisa saying something, but her words sounded far away and unclear. The last thing Jake remembered was falling to his knees as the white light surrounded them completely. He felt Lisa's hand slip from his as everything went dark. When Jake woke up, he was lying on a hard, smooth surface. The first thing he noticed was the smell. It was clean, too clean, like a hospital, but without any of the familiar chemical scents. The air felt different, too. Thinner somehow, but still breathable. He opened his eyes slowly and immediately knew he was not in the Amazon anymore. He was in a room with white walls that seemed to glow with their own light. The ceiling was high and curved, more like being inside a giant egg than a normal room. There were no windows, no doors that he could see. "Jake?" Lisa's voice came from somewhere nearby. "Are you awake?" Jake sat up and saw Lisa sitting against one of the curved walls about 10 feet away. She looked confused and scared, but not hurt. Her backpack was gone, and her clothes were dirty from the forest floor. "Where are we?" Jake asked, standing up carefully. His head felt fuzzy, like waking up from a very deep sleep. "I don't know," Lisa said. "I woke up about 10 minutes ago. There are other people here too." Jake looked around and saw she was right. There were other humans in the room, all sitting or lying on the smooth floor. He counted 12 people total, including himself and Lisa. They were all different ages and clearly from different backgrounds. An older man in a business suit sat next to a young woman in hiking gear. A teenager in a school uniform was talking quietly with a woman who looked like she might be a teacher. "Does anyone remember how we got here?" Jake called out to the group. "I was at work," said a man with dark hair and muscular arms. "Construction site in Texas? Then there was this light." "I was walking my dog in the park," said a woman with gray hair. "Same thing. Bright light, then nothing." Everyone had the same story. They had been doing normal things in different places around the world when the light appeared. Then they woke. "Up here, wherever here was." "This is impossible," Lisa said, standing up to join Jake. "You cannot just grab people from all over the world and bring them to one place. The logistics alone would be—" She stopped talking when one of the walls began to change. The smooth white surface became clear, like glass, and they could see into another room. But what they saw in that room made everyone step back in fear. The creatures on the other side of the wall were definitely not human. They were tall, maybe 8 feet, with long, thin bodies covered in what looked like shiny armor or shell. Their heads were strange, with multiple eyes that moved independently of each other. They had 4 arms, each ending in hands with too many fingers. One of the creatures moved closer to the wall and touched something. Suddenly, a voice filled the room, speaking in clear English but with a strange accent. "Greetings, humans. You have been selected for our survival trials. We are the Vorthek, and we have studied your species for some time. You are here because humans have a reputation for surviving in impossible situations. We wish to test this reputation." The voice paused, and Jake could see the creature's multiple eyes focusing on different people in the room. "Do not be afraid. If you survive our test, you will be returned to your world. If you do not survive, your deaths will contribute to our understanding of human limitations. The test will begin soon." The wall became white again, leaving the humans alone with their fear and confusion. Jake looked at Lisa and saw his own thoughts reflected in her eyes. They were prisoners of aliens about to face some kind of deadly test, and they had no idea what was coming next. The wall became clear again, and the alien creature appeared. Its multiple eyes moved in different directions as it studied the humans. When it spoke, its voice filled the room with that same strange accent. "You will now be moved to the testing area. Do not resist. Resistance will result in immediate failure of the test." Before anyone could respond, the floor beneath them began to glow. Jake felt the same heavy feeling in his legs that he remembered from the forest. Lisa grabbed his arm as the white light surrounded them again. This time, Jake forced himself to stay awake, fighting against the strange effect of the light. When the light faded, they were standing in a completely different place. Jake looked around in amazement. They were inside what looked like a massive dome, so large that he could not see the far walls. The ceiling curved high above them, made of some clear material that showed stars beyond. But these were not the stars Jake knew from Earth. The patterns were all wrong. The ground beneath their feet was covered with different types of terrain. To his left, Jake could see what looked like a desert with strange red sand and tall crystal formations that sparkled in the dim light. To his right was an area covered with unusual plants that seemed to glow with their own colors. Straight ahead was a rocky area with pools of water that steamed and bubbled. "Welcome to your testing environment," the alien voice said, though Jake could not see where it was coming from. "This dome contains ecosystems from several worlds. You will notice that the air is currently breathable for your species. However, in exactly 1 hour, we will begin removing oxygen from the environment." Jake felt his stomach drop. Lisa's grip on his arm tightened. "The oxygen will be removed gradually over 72 hours, the voice continued. "When the process is complete, there will be no breathable air remaining in the dome. You must find a way to survive using only what you can find in this environment. No technology will be provided. No rescue will come." The older man in the business suit stepped forward. "Wait, you cannot just remove all the oxygen. We will die." "Yes," the alien voice replied without emotion. "Most species do. This is why it is called a survival test. You may begin exploring your environment. The countdown has already started." The voice stopped, leaving the 13 humans alone in the vast dome. For a moment, nobody moved. Then several people began talking at once. "This is insane," said the woman with gray hair. "How are we supposed to survive without air?" "There has to be a way," said the muscular man from the construction site. "They would not test us if it was completely impossible." "Maybe they would," said the teenager. "Maybe they just want to watch us die." Jake looked around at the group. He could see panic starting to set in. People were scared, and scared people made bad decisions. His military training kicked in. "Everyone, listen," Jake said loudly. "Panicking will not help us. We need to stay calm and think." "Easy for you to say," snapped the woman in hiking gear. "You are not the one who is going to suffocate." "We are all going to suffocate if we do not work together," Jake replied. "My name is Jake Morrison. I am a lieutenant in the Army. This is Dr. Lisa Carter. She is a scientist who studies plants." Lisa stepped forward. "Jake is right. We need to approach this systematically. Let me look around and see what kind of plant life we are dealing with. Maybe there is something here that can help us." A man with short brown hair and calloused hands raised his hand. "I am Danny Brooks. I am an engineer. If we need to build something, I can help." "I am Amy Foster," said the woman who looked like a teacher. "I teach high school. I am good at organizing people and solving problems." "Carlos Rivera," said the muscular man, Marine Corps, retired. "I know survival techniques." The others introduced themselves as well. There was Betty, the woman with gray hair who worked as a nurse. Tom, the businessman who ran a small company. Maria, the teenager who was still in school. Dr. Paul Wright, an older man who was a medical doctor. Kenny, the woman in hiking gear who worked as a park ranger. And finally, Steve, a quiet man who said he was a mechanic. "Okay," Jake said. "We have 1 hour before they start removing oxygen. We need to explore this place and see what we have to work with." The group split up into pairs and began exploring different areas of the dome. Jake and Lisa headed toward the area with the glowing plants. Carlos and Danny went to examine the crystal formations. Amy and Betty checked out the water pools. The others spread out to cover more ground. As they walked, Lisa pulled out a small notebook that she had somehow kept through the abduction. "I am going to document everything I see. There might be patterns that can help us." The plants in this section of the dome were unlike anything Jake had ever seen. Some were tall and thin like trees, but their leaves were silver and seemed to move without any wind. Others were low to the ground and looked almost like coral from the ocean. Many of them gave off their own light in different colors: blue, green, purple, and yellow. "This is incredible," Lisa said, kneeling down near a patch of moss-like growth. "Look at this. It is similar to the moss we were studying in the Amazon, but the color is different, and see how it pulses." Jake watched as the moss seemed to breathe, getting brighter and dimmer in a steady rhythm. "What does that mean?" "I'm not sure yet," Lisa said, carefully touching the moss. "But most plants that glow are doing it for a reason. Either to attract something or to process energy somehow." They continued exploring, with Lisa taking notes about every plant they found. Jake kept an eye on the time and watched for anything that might be useful for survival. He found metal scraps scattered around the area, probably debris from previous tests. There were also strange rock formations that felt warm to the touch. After 45 minutes, the groups met back in the center of the dome to share what they had found. The news was not good. "The water pools are too hot to drink," Amy reported. "And they smell like sulfur." "The crystals are pretty, but I do not see how they help us breathe," Danny said. "Though some of them seem to conduct electricity." "I found some edible-looking fruits," Jenny said. "But without knowing what they are, eating them could be dangerous." "The desert area has nothing useful," Tom added. "Just sand and rocks?" Jake looked around at the discouraged faces. "Lisa, what about the plants?" Lisa looked up from her notes. "There are dozens of different species here. Some of them might produce oxygen, but I need time to study them properly. And even if they do, I do not know if they produce enough to keep us alive." "Time is something we do not have," Carlos said grimly. "We have 15 minutes before they start removing oxygen." That was when the alien voice returned. "Your exploration time is ending. The oxygen removal process will begin in 10 minutes. We suggest you use this time to say your goodbyes." Jake felt anger rising in his chest. The aliens were treating them like lab rats, watching to see how long they would last before dying. But anger would not help them survive. "Listen," Jake said to the group, "we are not going to give up. Lisa, you said some of these plants might produce oxygen. Which ones?" Lisa pointed toward the area they had just explored. "The moss-like plants show the most promise. They have a pulsing light pattern that suggests they might be processing gases. But I do not know how to make them produce more oxygen or how to collect it." "What if we could stimulate them somehow?" Danny asked. "You said the crystals conduct?" "Electricity. Maybe we could use that." "With what?" Jenny asked. "We do not have any tools. We have metal scraps," Jake said. "And we have our clothes. Carlos, what do you think?" Carlos looked thoughtful. "In survival situations, you use what you have. We have fabric, metal, and these strange plants. If we can figure out how to connect them." 5 minutes remaining, the alien voice announced. Jake could feel his heart beating faster. They were running out of time, and they barely had the beginning of a plan, but it was better than nothing. "Everyone gather as much moss as you can find," Jake ordered. "Danny, collect metal scraps. Carlos, help me figure out how to put this together. Lisa, keep studying those plants. We need to know how they work." The group scattered, working frantically as their time ran out. Jake did not know if their plan would work, but he knew one thing for certain: humans did not give up easily. And they were about to prove that to the aliens who thought they were just another species to study. The countdown was about to begin. The alien voice echoed through the dome one final time. "Oxygen removal has begun. You have 72 hours. Jake felt the change immediately. The air did not feel different yet, but knowing that every breath was bringing them closer to death made his chest feel tight. Around him, the other humans were gathering materials with desperate energy. Lisa knelt beside a large patch of the glowing moss, her notebook in one hand and a metal fragment in the other. "Jake, look at this," she called. "When I touch the moss with the metal, the pulsing gets faster." Jake hurried over and watched as Lisa pressed the metal against the moss. The blue-green glow became brighter, and the rhythm increased from a slow pulse to a rapid flicker. "What does that mean?" Jake asked. "I think it means the moss is reacting to the metal," Lisa said, her voice getting excited. "Maybe it uses minerals to help with whatever chemical process it does. If I'm right, we might be able to make it produce more oxygen." Danny appeared beside them, his arms full of metal scraps. "I found these all over the place, different shapes and sizes. Some of them feel warm, some are cold. They might be made of different materials." Carlos joined them, carrying torn strips of fabric from his shirt. "If we need to contain something, we can use these. They are not much, but they might work as containers." Amy and Betty approached with their arms full of the moss-like plants. We gathered as much as we could, Amy said. Jenny and the others are still collecting more. Jake looked around at the group. Even though they were facing death, they were working together. It reminded him of his military training when soldiers had to depend on each other to survive. Lisa, what do we need to do? Jake asked. Lisa was studying the moss carefully, holding it up to the light. I think this organism processes gases differently than Earth plants. See how it glows? That light might be part of how it makes oxygen. If we can figure out how to control the process, we might be able to make it produce more. Like a machine? Danny asked. More like a living machine, Lisa replied. But we need to understand how it works first. Over the next hour, Lisa experimented with the moss while the others brought her different materials. She discovered that the moss responded to certain metals more than others. A piece of copper-colored metal made it glow bright green. A silver fragment turned the light blue. When she combined different metals, the moss pulsed in complex patterns. It is like the moss is feeding on the minerals, Lisa explained, but it is not eating them. It is using them to process something in the air. What if it is processing carbon dioxide? Jake suggested. That would make oxygen, right? Lisa's eyes went wide. Jake, you might be right. If this moss takes in carbon dioxide and produces oxygen, then we just need to figure out how to make it do more of that. Meanwhile, Carlos was working on a different problem. Even if we can make oxygen, how do we breathe it? We need some way to get it from the moss to our lungs. Danny was already thinking about this. We could make a tube, he said. Roll up some fabric, make it into a pipe, put one end near the moss, breathe through the other end. That might work for one person, Jake said. But we have 13 people here. We need something better. Tom, the businessman, had been quietly watching the experiments. What if we made individual breathing devices, like masks, but simpler? With what? Jenny asked. We do not have the right materials. Lisa looked up from her moss experiments. Actually, we might. Look at these leaves from the silver plants. They are flexible, but strong. We could shape them into cups or containers. As the group talked, Jake noticed that some of the humans were starting to look tired. The oxygen levels were dropping, and people were beginning to feel the effects. Maria, the teenager, was sitting down and breathing hard. Dr. Wright was checking on her, but his own face was pale. We need to work faster, Jake said. People are already getting sick. Lisa nodded and turned back to her experiments. She had been testing different combinations of metals and moss, trying to find the best way to stimulate oxygen production. Finally, she found something that worked. Jake, Danny, come here, she called. I think I have it. She had placed a handful of moss in a cup-shaped leaf. Around the moss, she had arranged several small metal fragments in a circle. When she connected the metals with thin wires made from unraveled fabric, the moss began to glow brightly and pulse very fast. It is producing oxygen, Lisa said, her voice filled with excitement. I can feel it. Put your hand over the cup. Jake held his hand above the leaf cup and felt a slight breeze. The air felt fresher, cleaner. It is working, he said. But is it enough? Lisa frowned. Not yet. We need to make it more efficient. And we need to make one for each person. Danny studied the device. I can help with that. If we make the connections better, we might get more oxygen. And if we can seal the cups better, we can direct the airflow. They worked together, improving the design. Carlos contributed ideas about how to make the breathing apparatus more comfortable. Amy helped organize the materials and coordinate the group's efforts. Even Tom, despite his business background, proved useful at problem-solving. As they worked, Jake noticed something interesting. The moss seemed to respond to their breathing. When someone breathed out near it, the moss pulsed faster. When they breathed in, it slowed down. Lisa, I think the moss is using our carbon dioxide, Jake said. It is taking what we breathe out and turning it into oxygen? Lisa tested this theory by breathing directly onto a patch of moss. The glow became much brighter, and she could feel more air movement above it. You are right, she said. It is a perfect cycle. We breathe out carbon dioxide, the moss uses it to make oxygen, and we breathe the oxygen back in. This discovery changed everything. Instead of just trying to make the moss produce more oxygen, they could create a system where their own breathing helped fuel the process. Danny quickly redesigned their breathing device. He created a cup with two openings, one for breathing in the oxygen-rich air from the moss, and one for breathing out carbon dioxide onto the moss. The metal fragments were arranged to conduct electricity between different parts of the moss, stimulating it to work harder. It is like a biological air recycler, Danny explained. The moss cleans our air and gives us fresh oxygen. The first working prototype was crude but effective. Lisa tested it first, holding the leaf cup over her nose and mouth. She breathed out into it, and the moss glowed bright green. Then she breathed in, and her face immediately looked better. "It works," she said, her voice muffled by the device. "The air tastes clean, fresh." Jake tried it next, then Danny. Each person who used the device felt immediate relief. The dizzy feeling from low oxygen went away, and they could think clearly. "Again, we need to make these for everyone," Jake said. "Fast." The group worked with new energy. Now that they knew the solution worked, they could focus on making enough devices for everyone. They gathered more moss, more metal fragments, more leaves. They learned to arrange the materials in the most efficient way. Betty, the nurse, was particularly good at making the breathing devices comfortable to wear. She figured out how to shape the leaves so they fit properly over people's faces without being too tight or too loose. Jenny used her park ranger knowledge to identify which plants had the strongest and most flexible leaves. Steve, the mechanic, was surprisingly good at making the electrical connections between the metal fragments. Even Maria, despite being the youngest, contributed by testing different arrangements of the moss to see which ones produced the most oxygen. As the second day began, they had working breathing devices for everyone. The moss-powered air recyclers were keeping all 13 humans alive in an environment that should have killed them, but Jake knew their success was about more than just survival. They had taken an impossible situation and found a solution that no one had expected. They had turned alien plants into life-saving technology using nothing but scraps and their own ingenuity. The aliens had expected them to fail like every other species. Instead, the humans had proven that they could adapt to anything, even the most impossible circumstances, and they were just getting started. By the middle of the second day, all 13 humans had working breathing devices. The moss-powered air recyclers were keeping everyone alive, but Jake could see that some people were still struggling. The devices worked, but they were not perfect. Some people had trouble keeping them positioned correctly. Others found that their moss was not producing enough oxygen for their needs. Lisa sat beside a large patch of moss, carefully studying how it responded to different conditions. She had been experimenting for hours, trying to understand exactly how the alien plant worked. Her notebook was filled with observations and sketches. "The moss produces more oxygen when it is wet," she told Jake. "And it works better when the temperature is just right. Too hot or too cold, and it slows down." Jake nodded, watching as she dripped water onto a sample of moss. The blue-green glow became brighter immediately. "Can we control the temperature?" "Maybe," Lisa said. "Some of those crystals Danny found get warm when you rub them. If we place them near the moss, it might help." Danny overheard them talking and came over with his arms full of different colored crystals. "I have been testing these," he said. "The red ones get hot, the blue ones stay cool. We could use them to keep the moss at the right temperature." While they worked on improving the moss cultivation, Carlos was addressing a different problem. He had noticed that not everyone was using their breathing devices correctly. Some people were breathing too fast, which made the moss work harder than it needed to. Others were not breathing deeply enough, which meant they were not getting enough oxygen. "We need to teach everyone how to breathe properly," Carlos told Amy. "In the military, we learned breathing techniques for high-stress situations." "This is definitely a high-stress situation," Amy nodded. As a teacher, she was good at explaining things in ways that people could understand. Let me gather everyone together. We can have a training session." She called the group over and Carlos demonstrated the proper breathing technique. "Breathe in slowly through your nose," he instructed. "Hold it for a few seconds, then breathe out slowly through your mouth onto the moss. The moss needs your carbon dioxide, but it needs it at the right rate." Maria, the teenager, was the first to get it right. "It is like meditation," she said. "My mom taught me breathing exercises for when I get anxious." "This is similar." Dr. Wright, the medical doctor, added his knowledge. "Controlled breathing also helps your body use oxygen more efficiently. If we breathe properly, we need less oxygen overall." As the group practiced the breathing techniques, Jake noticed something interesting. The people who were breathing correctly were not just surviving better. They looked healthier, more alert. Their moss was producing more oxygen, and they seemed to have more energy. "Lisa, look at this," Jake said, pointing to Tom's breathing device. The businessman had been struggling earlier, but now his moss was glowing brightly and producing a steady stream of fresh air. Lisa studied the device carefully. "The moss is responding to the rhythm of his breathing. When he breathes steadily, the moss works more efficiently. It is like they are working together." This gave Jake an idea. What if we could make the moss work even better? What if we could create a system where all the moss work together? Danny's eyes lit up. "You mean connect all the devices somehow?" "Maybe," Jake said. "Or maybe we could create a central air system. One big moss garden that produces oxygen for everyone." Lisa was already thinking about how this might work. We would need a lot more moss, and we would need a way to distribute the oxygen to everyone. Jenny, the park ranger, had been exploring other parts of the dome while the others worked on the breathing devices. "I found something that might help," she said. "There are these vine-like plants that seem to have hollow stems. They might work like natural pipes." She led them to an area where thick, rope-like vines grew between the trees. When Danny cut one of the vines, they discovered that it was indeed hollow inside. Air flowed through it easily. "Perfect," Danny said. "We can use these as tubes to carry oxygen from a central moss garden to individual breathing stations." The group spent the rest of the day working on this new system. They created a large moss garden in the center of their camp, using the best techniques they had learned. The moss was kept at the perfect temperature with crystals, watered regularly, and supplied with plenty of metal fragments to stimulate oxygen production. From this central garden, they ran hollow vines to different areas where people could work or rest. Each person still had their individual breathing device, but they also had access to the central oxygen supply. Betty, the nurse, was particularly helpful in setting up the individual stations. "Each person needs their own space," she explained. "Somewhere they can rest and breathe easily, like hospital rooms but made from plants." As they worked, Jake noticed that they were not just surviving anymore. They were actually improving their situation. The dome that had been designed to kill them was becoming a place where they could live comfortably. Tom, despite his business background, proved to be surprisingly good at organizing the work. "We need to think about efficiency," he said. "What?" "Tasks take the most energy. How can we do them with less effort?" He suggested that they work in shifts, with some people maintaining the moss gardens while others explored the dome for more useful materials. This way, everyone could rest while still contributing to the group's survival. Steve, the mechanic, made an important discovery during one of his explorations. "There are more metal fragments scattered throughout the dome," he reported. "But some of them are different from what we have been using. They make the moss react in new ways." He showed them a piece of metal that looked like gold. When placed near the moss, it made the plants glow with a bright white light and produce oxygen at an incredible rate. "This changes everything," Lisa said, studying the new metal. "With this, we could produce enough oxygen for twice as many people." Jake felt a surge of pride as he watched the group work together. They had not just solved the problem of survival. They had created something amazing. The breathing system they had built was better than anything the aliens had expected, but more importantly, they had proven something about human nature. When faced with an impossible situation, humans did not just give up. They worked together, shared their knowledge, and found solutions that no one had thought possible. Dr. Wright, who had been quiet for most of the day, finally spoke up. I have been thinking about what we have accomplished here. We have taken an alien ecosystem and learned to work with it. We have created technology from biological materials. We have turned a death trap into a livable environment. And we did it in less than 2 days, Amy added. The aliens gave us 72 hours, but we solved the problem in less than 48. Carlos nodded. In survival training, we learned that the most important thing is not to give up. But this is more than just not giving up. We have thrived. As the second day ended, Jake looked around at their camp. The central moss garden glowed softly in the center, connected by vine tubes to individual breathing stations. People were resting comfortably, breathing easily, and even talking and laughing. They had beds made from soft plant fibers. They had discovered that some of the alien fruits were not only safe to eat but actually tasted good. They had a reliable source of clean water from condensation systems they had built using the crystals. You know what? Jake said to Lisa as they sat together beside the moss garden. I think we are not just surviving. I think we are actually living better than we were before. Lisa smiled. The aliens probably expected us to be dead by now. Instead, we have turned their test into a demonstration of human ingenuity. Jake nodded. I wonder what they are thinking right now. Are they watching us? Are they surprised? Neither of them knew that above them, in the observation rooms, the Vorthak were indeed watching, and they were more than surprised. They were amazed. Never before had any species not only survived their test, but actually improved upon their environment. The humans had done something that the Vorthak had thought impossible. They had turned a survival test into a success story. And there was still one more day to go. On the morning of the third day, Jake woke up feeling better than he had since arriving in the dome. The air around him was fresh and clean, filled with oxygen from the moss gardens that now covered much of their camp. He could hear the soft sounds of his fellow humans talking and working together. Lisa was already awake, sitting beside the central moss garden with her notebook. She was drawing detailed pictures of how the moss responded to different combinations of metals and crystals. Her work had become the foundation for all their survival systems. Good morning, she said when she saw Jake. I have been thinking about something. The moss is producing more oxygen than we need now, much more. Jake looked around and realized she was right. The air felt rich and fresh, almost like breathing pure mountain air. What does that mean? It means we have not just solved the survival problem, Lisa said. We have created something that works better than the original environment. The dome has more breathable air now than when we started. Danny approached them, carrying a new device he had been working on during the night. I made something, he said, showing them what looked like a small pack with tubes coming out of it. It is a portable moss garden. Someone can wear it and walk around the dome while still breathing clean air. Jake examined the device. It was cleverly designed, with moss contained in a clear container, connected to a breathing mask by hollow vines. The whole thing was powered by small crystals and metal fragments. This is incredible, Jake said. We could explore the entire dome now. Carlos joined them, returning from his morning patrol of their camp. I have been watching the walls, he said. I think the aliens are getting nervous. I can see movement behind the glass areas. More movement than before. As if responding to his words, the familiar alien voice filled the dome. But this time it sounded different. Less confident than before, attention humans. Your test period will end in 12 hours. Prepare for final evaluation. Amy looked up from where she was teaching Maria how to improve her breathing device. Final evaluation? What does that mean? Dr. Wright, who had been checking on everyone's health, frowned. It sounds like they want to examine us, see how we survived. Or see how we failed, Tom added grimly. But Jake did not think they had failed. As he looked around their camp, he saw humans who were not just alive but healthy and active. They had created a thriving community in what was supposed to be a death trap. Steve approached the group, carrying something in his hands. "I found something weird," he said. "There are new plants growing where we put our moss gardens." Plants that were not here before. Lisa immediately became interested. "Show me," she said. Steve led them to an area where they had been experimenting with different moss arrangements. Growing among their cultivated moss were small plants with bright green leaves and tiny white flowers. "These definitely were not here when we started," Lisa said, kneeling down to examine them. "They must have grown from seeds or spores that were activated by our moss gardens." "Are they dangerous?" Jenny asked. Lisa carefully touched one of the new plants. "I do not think so. In fact, I think they might be helpful. Look at how they are growing right next to our moss. They might be working together somehow." She was right. The new plants seemed to be feeding nutrients to the moss, which in turn was producing even more oxygen. The two species were creating a partnership that benefited both. "We are not just surviving," Jake realized. "We are improving this place, making it better than it was before." Betty, who had been listening to the conversation, smiled. "We are like gardeners. We took this artificial environment and made it into something alive and growing." The group spent the morning exploring other areas of the dome with their new portable breathing devices. They discovered that their influence had spread much further than they realized. Everywhere they had worked, new life was growing. The dome was becoming more alive, more natural. As the final hours approached, they gathered together in their main camp. The central moss garden now covered an area the size of a small house, glowing softly and producing a steady stream of fresh air. Vine tubes carried oxygen to individual stations throughout their settlement. New plants grew everywhere, creating a garden paradise in what had been an alien test chamber. "Whatever happens next," Jake said to the group, "I want you all to know that I am proud of what we accomplished here. We did not just survive, we created something amazing. We proved that humans do not give up," Carlos added, "even when the situation seems impossible." "We proved that we can work together," Amy said. 30 strangers became a team. "We proved that we can learn and adapt," Lisa said. "We understood alien plants better than the aliens expected." As they talked, the walls of the dome began to change. The solid surfaces became transparent, and they could see into the rooms beyond. Dozens of the tall insectoid Vorthak were gathered, their multiple eyes focused on the human camp. "Time remaining, 0, the alien voice announced. "Test concluded. Prepare for evaluation." The familiar white light began to surround them, but this time Jake forced himself to stay conscious. He wanted to see what happened next. As the light faded, they found themselves back in the white room where they had started. But they were not alone. 3 of the Vorthak stood before them, their chitinous shells gleaming under the bright lights. When the center alien spoke, its voice was filled with something Jake had not heard before: amazement. "We have observed your performance during the survival trial," it said. "In our study of 47 different species, no group has ever survived beyond the first day. Most fail within hours." "We did more than survive," Jake said, standing up to face the aliens. "We thrived." "Yes," the alien replied. "This is unprecedented. You not only survived the removal of oxygen, but you created a more efficient oxygen production system than existed in the dome originally. You improved upon our environment." Another alien stepped forward. "You have used our plant life in ways we never considered. Your biological breathing devices are more effective than our technological air systems. You have also created new life," the third alien added. "Species that did not exist before are now growing in the dome. You have accelerated evolution." Lisa stepped forward. "Your moss was already amazing. We just learned how to work with it instead of against it." "This perspective is foreign to us," the first alien said. "We test species to see how long they can resist death. You have shown us how to create life?" Jake felt a surge of pride, not just for himself but for all humanity. That is what humans do. We do not just try to survive. We try to make things better. The aliens seemed to confer among themselves in a series of clicking sounds. Finally, the center alien spoke again. We offer you 3 choices. First, you may return to your world with your memories removed, as if this never happened. Second, you may remain here as honored guests, helping us understand human innovation. Third, the alien paused as if the next words were difficult to say. Third, you may return to your world as ambassadors. We will establish contact with your species, sharing knowledge and learning from each other. Jake looked at his fellow humans. They had gone through an impossible situation together and come out stronger. Now they had a chance to represent all of humanity. We choose the third option, Jake said without hesitation. But we want to add something to the deal. What do you propose? The alien asked. We want to bring some of the moss back with us, Lisa said. And we want to teach other humans what we learned here. The breathing technology we developed could help people on Earth too. And we want proof, Tom added, showing his business sense. Our people will not believe this story without evidence. The aliens conferred again. Finally, they agreed. Your species has shown us that survival is not about resisting death, but about creating life. We accept your terms. You will return as ambassadors with samples of our plant life and full documentation of your achievements. As they prepared to leave, Jake looked around at his fellow humans one more time. They had started as strangers facing an impossible test. They were leaving as pioneers who had opened a new chapter in human history, the story of 13 humans, who turned an alien death trap into a garden would spread across the galaxy. And it would prove that sometimes the best way to pass a test is to change the rules entirely.